Welcome to today's video on section 1.6, Transformations Continued. Today we're going to talk about reflections. A reflection happens, for example, if you have the base function f of x equals the square root of x. So it looks like this. So you have 0, 0, 1, 1, and 4, 2. That is the base function. A reflection happens if you put a negative sign in one of two places. You could have a negative sign inside the function, inside, where you're taking the opposite of x. If it is inside the function, then it is said to be considered reflected about the y-axis. So this is where you have the negative on the inside. So basically, you have f of negative x. The negative is inside the parentheses. So to figure that out, you're going to take negative 1 and multiply it times the x coordinate. So here, you would keep 0, 0, but now you would have negative 1, 1. And here you would have negative 4 and 2. So that would be f of negative x. F of x equals the square root of negative x. To do a reflection about the x-axis, this is where you have the negative on the outside. So for example, f negative of f of x. So this is where you would go negative 1 times the y coordinate. So if I wanted to find f of x equals the negative of the square root of x, like that, see the negative sign's outside of the square root, then you just multiply each y coordinate by negative 1. So you still have 0, 0, but then you have 1, negative 1. And then you have 4, negative 2. So it makes it go like that. So those are two ways that you can reflect a graph. So to talk about some of the ways that we can reflect the base function. So let's go through each base function. And make a chart. So if we wanted to reflect it across the x-axis, and if we wanted to reflect it across the y-axis, what it would look like. So you have the base function f of x equals x squared. If we wanted it to reflect across the x-axis, which means the negative is on the outside, it would look like that. If we would want to reflect it across the y-axis, the negative would be in the parentheses and we would square it. For the cubic function, if we wanted to reflect it across the x-axis, we'd put the negative sign outside. If we want to reflect it across the y-axis, we'd put the negative sign inside the parentheses. Absolute value, same thing. If we want to reflect it across the x, we put the absolute value, the negative sign outside. And if we want to reflect it across the y, we put the negative sign inside the absolute value. Same thing for square root. Negative sign goes outside to reflect it across the x. Negative sign goes inside to reflect it across the y. Kind of what we did in the first example. Exponential would look like this. The negative sign would be outside, so in front of the e to reflect across the x, and it would be in the exponent to reflect across the y. For ln, you had have the negative sign in front of the ln to reflect across the x, and in next to the x to reflect across the y. And finally, we'll do the reciprocal function. So the negative sign would have to be in front to reflect across the x, and the negative sign would have to be just with the x to reflect across the y. Now remember what each one does. Reflecting across the x means you go -1 times the y coordinate. And remember, reflecting across the y does -1 times the x coordinate. That's what each one would do. All right, now that you have an idea of the transformations, why don't you take a moment, pause the video, and see if you can't list the transformation that's being done in each one of these equations. So go ahead and pause it, and then I will tell you which ones are being done. All right, so for the first one, this is going to be a horizontal shift, because notice the +4 is in the function. So the horizontal shift to the left, 4. Number 2, notice the +4 is outside the EVX, so it's a vertical shift. And it's going to go up 4 since we're adding. Number 3, the negative sign is outside of it's in front. So anytime the negative sign is in front or outside of the function is going to be a reflection across the x-axis. Number 4, notice you're adding 12 to the inside of the function, so it's going to be a horizontal shift to the left 12. Number 5, notice the negative sign is inside the function, so we have a reflection across the y-axis. And number 6, notice the -14 is outside, so we have a vertical shift down by 14. All right, hopefully you got all those correct. Let's go to the next page. So here we have an example. We're going to graph this. So first, the base function of this one is the square root. And remember, the square root function, you have 0, 0. You have 1, 1. And you have 4, 2. Those are the 3 points we normally use. So that is the square root function. Number 2, the transformations. Now, the transformations are going to go in this order. We're always going to do a horizontal shift first. So we're going to do the horizontal shift. And in this case, we're going to go to the left 2, because it's +2 in the parentheses. Then we're going to do the reflection next. So it's reflected across the x-axis because the negative sign is outside. And then we're going to do the vertical shift. That's going to come last, the vertical shift down 6. So when we make our chart, we're going to have our points 0, 0, 1, 1, and 4, 2. And then we're going to take, and we're going to go x minus 2. Then we're going to take negative 1 times the y. And then we're going to take that y minus 6. So here we subtract 2, so we have negative 2, 0. Then when we multiply the y by negative 1, we still have negative 2, 0. And then when we subtract 6, we have negative 2, negative 6. Here, when we subtract 2 from the x, we get negative 1, 1. We multiply the y by negative 1, so we have negative 1, negative 1. And then we subtract 6, so we have negative 1, negative 7. Here, when the x is subtracted for 2, we get 2, 1. Multiply the y by negative 1, so 2, negative 1. And then, it's 2, 2, and then it's 2, negative 2. And then subtract 6, so we get 2, negative 8. So then we're going to plot those points. So if you notice here, we'll get negative 2, negative 6. Negative 1, negative 7. And 2, negative 8. And that would be our new graph. F of x equals negative x plus 2 minus 6. That is the graph. So really quickly, the correct order of transformations. There's actually 6 transformations that we can do. The first one we haven't learned yet, so we're going to put a little TBA. The second thing that we would do is we'll reflect across the y-axis because that's inside the function. That would come first. The third thing would be a horizontal shift. That would be third. 4 is to be announced. 5 is going to be a reflection across the x-axis, so the negative sign outside. And then 6 is a vertical shift. Remember, on this one, you multiply negative 1 times the x coordinate. And this one, you go negative 1 times the y coordinate. All right, that concludes our video for tonight. Just want to give a shout out to all those that had a birthday today. Jordan, Jenna, and Zach Ocean. Happy birthday, and hope you enjoy the video.